Hi guys, this is the next episode in the vlog on the experienced teacher through action research. So this one's going to be a reflection video. I'm going to record two of these now. It's been a couple of weeks since I've recorded one. I've actually had a cold and my voice has been pretty rough. And for that reason and my personal vanity, I chose not to actually record anything in that time. So I'm going to talk here about a couple of things that I've seen over the next couple of weeks. Now we're at week 4, or the end of week 4 of what was to be a 5-week testing phase. So we've got about a week to go. I may end up extending that because of some disruptions that we had to class. I'll see how I go. But yeah, so getting on with the reflections. So the first one that I wanted to talk about was the mastery stop. So you might remember that in the previous or the control phase, I had mastery checks. So students were to do a little formative assessment and just for me and for them to see where they're at, and then I gave them feedback on this. On that. With the idea of a mastery stop is that they do this formative assessment, but they need to demonstrate mastery to then progress on from there. And the threshold we've set for mastery is about 75%. What I've decided to do is make the each of the little mastery steps or mastery checks about out of 9, and they need 7 or more to display mastery. Now the first thing here is trying to get out of the language that they generally use, which is that if they whether they pass or fail, because of the negative connotations that come with that. I've been very explicit with the kids that they have either displayed mastery or not yet displayed mastery, because they do have the opportunity to go back and display that mastery again. It's not fair to say that they've failed, they just haven't displayed mastery. So that was the first thing that I sort of noticed, which is kind of expected with students, particularly students that are sort of trained to think that getting 50% on some sort of task is a pass, whatever that might be. Interesting to think that students think that it's reasonable that if they retain 50% of or half of what the information we expect them to retain, that's a pass or reasonable, but that's a chat for another time. So what I wanted to do is talk about 2 of the mastery stops that I used, or 2 of the forms of mastery stops that I used, or mastery checks. The first one is the handwritten form. So with the handwritten form, I got the students to sit in the class and fill this one out. I didn't let them do it at home, needed to be in the class, and fill this out. And then I would that night go through and read them and make little feedback videos for them and explain sort of where they went wrong, how they could do it better, and whatnot. And then gave it back to them the next day with a little link to that video. To go over and have a look at the data I got. So these are the 3 mastery checks we've done so far, and this 3rd mastery check has not been completed by everyone at this stage, and this is just looking at the first attempts. So we can see that in that first one, which was a written one, the average was about 7 with a bit of a longer tail down here. So if they then did not demonstrate mastery, they were to go away and do the mastery check again. Which most of them, most students, if they didn't display mastery on the first time, by the second time they could, and the 3rd time was the most that got to for any student. Now, something that I noticed when I was marking this one was the how similar answers were, marking them in a busy classroom, because not everyone's doing the master check at once. Lots of kids doing different things, so it's far from test or exam conditions. So what I noticed was my language used, so notes that students had taken from videos, basically put back in verbatim, and also some common sort of examples coming up over and over again. So this made me decide to talk to the class about the idea of the mastery stops and the idea of actually checking to see where you're at, rather than just getting over the line for the sake of it. So just basically copying somebody else's. I didn't want to jump up and sort of call people out for doing that, because obviously it's set up to do that, but I just reinforced that it was a formative assessment tool, and the best way for them to actually learn was to identify where their weaknesses were, and there was no point in getting through if they didn't understand, because they would come to an assessment later where they wouldn't be able to understand. The next mastery check that I looked at was an online one. And the two further ones have been online, and these have just been Google quizzes with 9 questions in it, with 1 point for each, multiple choice. The benefit of these is I don't have to mark them myself, it self-marks. What I did do is change in the settings that the students aren't able to get a grade. Don't know, that's checked, but they don't actually get a grade. But yeah, the students don't get the grade, so that I actually have to go onto my computer and check to see whether they've demonstrated mastery in that or not. The reason I did this is I didn't want the students to basically go, all right, I got that question wrong, I'll try another answer. So by not knowing the ones that they got right and the ones that they got wrong meant that they couldn't game the mastery check. The downfall of this that I had to sort of deal with is then they're not getting feedback on the specific part of mastery that they don't have. But I figured that if they're demonstrating mastery at the end and there's a specific part that they don't get, it's probably a fairly minor part that we can address in other ways. So that's the online one. Because these self-marked, I got the results straight away. So I noticed a different problem, that students were, and I had one student in particular who did the mastery check, didn't show mastery, so did it again, didn't show mastery, and actually within a lesson, I think it might have been 6 different attempts, none of which showed mastery. So the next lesson I sort of spoke to the class again about this, and made the stipulation that they weren't able to, basically they had to come to a mastery check ready, thinking that they could display mastery, rather than prematurely go in and not displaying mastery. And if they didn't display mastery, they had to demonstrate to me that they'd done at least one side activity to bolster their knowledge so that they were prepared to go into the mastery check the second time. So put that little bit of a gap between the first mastery check and the second mastery check. And that seemed to work all right. The third mastery check, about half of the classes through, and there haven't been many that needed to resit that, which tells me that either they are waiting until they think they understand the content, because there is that slight penalty of having to do an extra task if they don't get there, or it's possible that mastery check was easier. I don't know. That'll be something that I'll have to talk to kids about in the future. But that's just some reflections on the mastery checks that we've used so far and how they've worked. Thanks for watching, guys. Peace out.